5 a.m. on May 1, 1999, an American mountaineering team at the altitude of Mount Everest in North Australia 200 meters. A skeleton was found. This discovery directly caused a sensation in the entire mountaineering world because of this corpse, precisely known as one of the most successful mountaineers of the 20th century, George Mallory. What kind of person is it to be able to be called the strongest challenger on Mount Everest? Why is he 244 meters from the summit of Mount Everest? He is about to become the first human being to reach the top of the world. When the mystery disappeared, did he succeed in reaching the top? What happened in the process? That's what we're going to talk about in this video. A century-old unsolved mystery in the mountaineering world. The mystery of the horse cave. From the end of the 18th century to the beginning of the 19th century, after mankind began to explore the North and South Poles. As the world's third pole, Mount Everest, the highest peak in the world, nature becomes the next target for people to conquer. Mount Everest is the main peak of the Himalayas. It is located on the border between China and Nepal. Its northern slope is located in the Qinghai Tibet Plateau of China. The southern slope is in Nepal. Mistress means goddess in Tibetan. Langma means female elephant. Together, we are Mother Earth. Since 1853, it was surveyed as the highest peak in the world. He became a mountaineer from all over the world. A holy place in my mind. Climb to the top of Mount Everest. It is the ultimate lifelong dream of every mountaineering enthusiast. May 29, 1953. New Zealand explorer Edmund Hillary and Sherpa guide Tenzin Lolgai successfully climbed Mount Everest from the south slope. Completed the first human ascent of the world's highest peak. Feat. May 25, 1960. Members of the Chinese mountaineering team Wang Fuzhou, Gong Pot and Chu Yinhua successfully reached the summit of Mount Everest. This is in the history of mankind. The feat of climbing Mount Everest from the north face for the first time. As of now, a total of 19 climbing routes have been opened up on Mount Everest. A total of 11,346 people made it to the top. As early as more than 100 years ago, there have been 14 attempts to reach the summit worldwide, but all ended in failure. June 8, 1924. Two of the top British mountaineers of the time, George Mallory and Andrew Owen, mysteriously disappeared 244 meters from the summit of Mount Everest. Owen's body has not been found. The most crucial relics have also disappeared. The last one to see Mao, their teammate Noel Odell said. 12:50 p.m. on the same day. They start from an altitude of 220 meters from the departure of the Arctic Battalion. Make a sprint towards the summit of Mount Everest. After climbing the second platform more than 200 meters from the summit, after disappearing into a blizzard, hasn't been seen since. George Mallory was born in England in 118286. When I was in high school, I already have a strong interest in natural rock climbing, and under the leadership of the mountaineer Evan, start learning to climb. After graduating from Magdalen College, University of Cambridge, Mallory is again in the Alps and the Lake District of England. Keep honing your climbing skills, and a new climbing route has been opened. Became the leading figure in British rock climbing at the time. After the end of World War I, he finished his military service. It has returned to the mountaineering world with new firepower. 1921 year, he took part in the first British expedition to Mount Everest. The expedition to Mount Everest, which at that time was still a blank area, northern and eastern regions, conduct a detailed investigation. The first purpose is to explore the northern part of Mount Everest and look for viable hiking routes. The second is to measure the area near Mount Everest and draw a map. After more than 3 months of trekking, expedition on June 19th, arrive in Dingri County, Tibet Autonomous Region. Mallory saw the haunting Mount Everest for the first time, since the northern part of Mount Everest has never been set foot by humans. It's all about nothing until late August. Then enter to the north and east of Mount Everest. After 2 months of arduous surveying, Mallory, from the western end of the Kata Glacier, climbed to the Lakpala Pass at an altitude of 6,800,249 meters. Here they found a passage. An East Rongbu Glacier stretches for several kilometers. Spanning the glacier is a 305-meter high wall of ice and snow. It leads to Mount Everest, North Australia at an altitude of 7,020 meters. Mallory and the expedition team, after several surveys, it was finally determined to pass through North Ridge, North Australia, the summit route of the Northeast Ridge. But this line, it is much more difficult than the southern slope of Nepal. It's not just dangerous ice slopes everywhere. The climate is also moody, especially for first-time climbers. It's hellish difficulty. September 23rd, Mallory, Brock Wheeler, and 10 porters leave the Lakpala camp, go down to the Higasheep Glacier. It is still 1.6 kilometers from the start of the climb in North Australia. That is A temporary camp was set up at an altitude of 6,706 meters. The porter here refers to the Tibetan Sherpas. It is also called a scholar. It is a mountainous land that inhabits both sides of the Himalayas. Residents are familiar with the local environment. Dedicated to those who climb Mount Everest. September 24th, Mallory with 3 expedition members and 3 porters form a temporary striker squad. Leave the camp. Come to the foot of a steep 305-meter high wall of ice and snow. Climbed with difficulty to the starting point of the North Olympics. But just as they were ready to launch their first climb, the weather deteriorated dramatically. A hurricane in the Indian Ocean hit. Blizzards continued. They had no choice but to descend to the camp on the East Rongbu Glacier. The next day, the squally still did not abate. Eventually, Mallory decided to end the project, although they did not succeed in this attempt. But for the subsequent climb, lots of information and experience provided, and it gave them a crazy dream. It is quite possible to climb Mount Everest from North Ao. 192 years after a comprehensive exploration, Mallory decided with his team, initiate a second ascent. Unlike the first detection ascent, Mallory's goal this time, it was to be the first person to reach the summit of Mount Everest. Mallory was at 5,029 meters above sea level on May 1st. A base camp was established. May 20th at 7:30 a.m. Mallory, Howard, Somerville, Edward, Norton, Henry, Mosshead, and 4 porters depart from Camp 4 at an altitude of 7,010 meters above sea level in northern Australia. Camp 5 was successfully established at an altitude of 7,620 meters. May 21st at 8 a.m., Mallory departed from Camp 5. 2:15 p.m., they reached an altitude of 8,225 meters. A new world record was set, but it drained their physical strength and energy. Food shortages, edema, and severe frostbite had to get them back to Camp 5 again. Take a break. According to the plan, May 27th by George, Finch, Jeffrey, Bruce, and Teach, a squad of oxygen cylinders formed by Bilbora depart from Camp 5 in Northridge, make a new round of attempts with the blessing of new equipment. This time they broke the world record again. Climbed to 8,321 meters above sea level. Half a month later, Mallory began his third ascent of Mount Everest. But we will not use oxygen products that are contrary to the spirit of mountaineering. But Mallory didn't know. At this time, Mount Everest has entered the monsoon season. The climate is very unstable. The ubiquitous sheer winds make the climb dangerous. June 7th at 8 a.m. Mallory samu verklink. Old Ford and 9 porters depart Camp 3 at an altitude of 6,401 meters. It crosses the mouth of the Higashibu Glacier. Mallory is confident of reaching the top. I want the world to see them to the top. Therefore, a video camera was also carried to record the climb. But at 1 p.m., around 50, halfway through their journey, suddenly, a violent snowstorm caused the ice cliffs above. An avalanche occurs. The entire team was overwhelmed by an avalanche. 7 Sherpas were swept into the crevasse and died. Once again, the summit had to be stopped. Camp 3, a monument was built in memory of the 7 victims. This also signs Mallory's third assault on Everest also failed. 3 consecutive failures in 2 years. For Mallory, a mountaineering leader, the blow was huge. In the following time, Mallory summed up the 4 major difficulties in climbing Mount Everest. The first is the team's climbing route in North Australia. The terrain is much more complex than the southern slope. In addition to the glaciers that stretch for several kilometers, there are also a lot of dangerous ice and ridges along the way. So Mallory based on these terrain features. The anti-skid device of this toothed structure is designed. That is the earliest mountaineering ice cover. The second difficulty is the wind. The wind speed on Mount Everest is extremely high. This is due to the vertical difference in the mountains, caused by differences in temperature and air pressure, especially in winter and spring. The average wind speed is 50 kilometers per hour, but in some extreme cases, the maximum wind speed can exceed 90 meters per second. That's 324 kilometers per hour. This is comparable to the 17 magnitude Typhoon Capricorn some time ago. It's a lot faster. The third difficulty is light, due to the super high altitude of Mount Everest, resulting in ultra-strong ultraviolet rays, plus snow reflections. Blood blindness was becoming a nightmare for mountaineers at the time. The fourth difficulty is called the wind chill index, is a calculation and speculation. The wind speed and temperature at which the human body is exposed to certain conditions. Environment, an index of how long it takes to have frostbite symptoms, because once frostbite appears, it cannot be treated in time. For climbers, it's a death sentence. Mallory will reflect on these in the way of writing and speaking to tell the story of a climber. Once he was lecturing in the United States in New York. A reporter from the Times asked him, "Why are you so obsessed with climbing Mount Everest?" He replied, "Because he was there." And the classic answer is because there is. It has also become a mountaineering sport, the most famous quote, except, of course, for reasons of his personal hobby. It was also related to the international situation at that time. 1909 year. Britain is in the race to get to the North Pole first. Lost to the American Peary. Then, in the 1911 South Pole competition, with a 1-month time difference, lost to the Norwegian explorer Amundsen. This was followed by the First World War. Britain was knocked down again. This was right at the time. As for the British elite of the old empire, it's a great shame. So after the end of World War I, Britain can't wait to get back on the ground, want to lead the world again. So he took the lead in conquering the highest mountain of the third pole, Everest. It became a priority for the United Kingdom. So in 1924, Mallory decided to summit Mount Everest once again. And this time was also his last. April 28th, 1924, an expedition led by General Charles the Bruce once again assemble on Mount Everest. This time, there are more than 50 experts from various industries. Even Sherpa porters employ more than 150 people. Look at this stance. Britain is on the verge of winning this time with Mallory, is the second protagonist of this video. Andrew Irving. Owen was a Cambridge University kayaker at the time, possessed tenacious willpower and amazing physical strength. Another reason, Owen also has a great talent for engineering. During the First World War, owing to the War Office, a design drawing for the synchronization unit was submitted. The design enables the aircraft to be driven from the propeller. Bullets shot out. It will not damage its blades. This caused quite a stir in the War Office, because Mallory has learned from previous experience. For this climb, you need to carry an oxygen cylinder to hit the ceiling. At that time, a set of oxygen equipment weighed about 30 pounds, but after Owen's transformation, successfully lost 4.5 pounds. Stability is also greatly improved, so Owen was the best person on the expedition at that time. On May 15th, the mountaineering team arrived at Rongbu Temple, which guards the glacier. According to Tibetan traditions, they asked to receive the blessings of the Lama. But the Lamas were hostile. Warn Mallory that your actions are fraught with danger. Will blaspheme the holiness of Our Lady. If you don't listen to the admonition, there will be people who will stay on Mount Kinabalu forever. Although this statement is not auspicious, but it couldn't stop Mallory, because he knows it well. This was his last chance to conquer Mount Everest. Mallory on the day's notes. That's how it's documented. God forbid, we're going to get to the top. Even if you use your teeth to climb, we also have to climb to the top of the mountain in a strong wind. Summing up the previous climbing experience, Mallory already had a great route to the summit in mind. He plans to set up a base camp at an altitude of 5,120 meters above sea level. The first camp was then set up at an altitude of 5,290 meters. The second camp is 6,400 meters. The third camp is 6,858 meters. The fourth camp is 7,010 meters. The fifth camp is 7,772 meters. The sixth camp is 8,291 meters. And the final summit of 800,048 meters. Such a plan. It is to provide rest adjustment for each stage. Thereinto, the most fatal stage is to start with Camp 4, Everest at this time, although it is not yet the monsoon season. But Mallory was on his way to Camp 2, still experiencing bad weather, although they have hiking suits and oxygen cylinders as a guarantee. But judging by the level of technology at that time, the equipment is still very rudimentary. However, faced with difficulties, they are still tenacious. Reached altitude 858 meters from the third camp. When you wake up in the morning, all the tents were covered with a thick layer of snow. Owen began to experience severe altitude sickness, splitting headaches. In view of this situation, they decided to temporarily withdraw to the base camp for adjustments. In the process of getting off the bus, 2 more Sherpas were killed. This chain of deaths, it worries Mallory. They were in the mountains. A simple burial was performed for the 2 Sherpas, and after a period of rest in the base camp, start climbing again. At this time, it was already June. The monsoon arrives earlier than usual. Despite the bad weather, they manage to make it to the third camp again. But the next mile, only Mallory, Owen, and camera assistant Odell will continue their journey. The rest of the Sherpas were in the third camp, waiting for their return. The road to Camp 4 was extremely difficult. They need to climb over a huge wall of ice. After a short period of adjustment, the trio managed to cross the ice wall and reach Camp 4. This is the northeast ridge of Mount Everest. Mallory had been on previous expeditions, been been to this place. The wind on the ridge was very strong. Strong winds can almost blow people away. The temperature is constantly dropping. Mallory began to cough violently. Owen, on the other hand, began to have diarrhea due to feeling unwell. After a short break, the camera assistant decided to return, and the last photo of Mallory and Owen was taken. At this point, Mallory and Owen were on oxygen cylinders. Get ready to take on the ultimate challenge to the top. Due to the limited oxygen reserve of oxygen cylinders, it only lasts 8 to 10 hours of oxygen, so until this point, before starting to use this precious oxygen. In the climbing world, the height of 8 kilometers is called the death zone, because it is extremely difficult for the human body to adapt to this height. The air is thin here, organs are prone to failure. Therefore, climbers must reach the summit in a short period of time. Quickly retreat the day of the summit on June 8, 1924. Odell saw 2 figures in the clouds in the distance. That's Mallory and Owen. Step by step, they are getting closer to the top. One of them moved very quickly. It seems to be a race against time. This person is most likely Mallory. But soon the mountain peaks were shrouded in thick fog. Odell lost his sight. When the fog clears slightly, Mallory and Owen have disappeared into the snowy mountains. 2 p.m. According to the plan, they should have already started to get out of the car at this point. But Odell never saw them again. All I could see was snow and howling winds. In the end, it was confirmed by many parties. Mallory and Owen are missing. Disappeared into the second step at an altitude of 8,603 meters. Mallory summit Mount Everest this time. It ended in tragedy and regret. There was an uproar in Britain. For the next 30 years, Mount Everest still stands proudly in the world. No human being can challenge his dignity. Until 1953, New Zealander Edmund Hillary Clinton made a successful ascent from the south of Mount Everest, became the first person to climb to the top of Mount Everest. So Mallory and Owen in 1924. Whether or not there was success in reaching the top, nobody knows. Over the next 75 years, no one noticed them, and no one is at the top either. Discover photos of Mallory's beloved wife, because Mallory had promised his wife one last challenge: to put his picture on the summit of Mount Everest. 1999. In search of these 2 mountaineering legends, the United States formed a Mallory and Owen research expeditions. The aim was to identify Mallory and Owen, whether it is the person who climbed Mount Everest for the first time. Their goals include finding their remains and retrieve a vehicle that may have saved evidence of the ascension. Kodak cameras. Consultant with Henheim Leibusch on this expedition. He re-examined the historical record of Mallory's ascent after he found out, in addition to artifacts such as ice drafts found in 1933, about Mallory and Owen. The only information that seems true is 1975 year. Chinese Everest expedition Humboldt. Within a 20-minute walk from Camp 6, a body suspected to be of a Briton was found. May 1st, 1999. Around 10 a.m., the Moyu expedition was centered at Camp 6. Take a 20-minute walk as a radius. A comprehensive search was launched. After 2 fruitless searches, the search team decided, expand the radius to 30 minutes away. Perform the final search mission. But the result is still nothing. Just as they were on their way back to Camp 6, a team member named Conrad Anker suddenly a white glitter was spotted in the afterglow. When he went searching with questions, a corpse appeared in front of him. The remains were partially frozen in a pile of rubble, but well preserved. Anker immediately opened the inner pocket of his clothes. It reads the George Miller label. This is exactly Mallory. It's been 75 years. They finally found the legendary climber. And in the pockets of clothes, there is also a letter from Mallory to his wife. But no picture of Ruth was found on him. This raised a question for people at the time. Has Mallory ever climbed to the top of Mount Everest? Whether the wife's photo has been put to the top. We said it earlier. The winds on Everest are stronger than those of a Category 17 typhoon. Don't say a photo. Even a boulder can be blown away, so it's normal that the photo can't be found. But where Mallory's body was found is located in, at that time, Odell looked below them for the last time. This may indicate that they have successfully reached the top. He was killed on the way down the mountain. Maybe. The only doubt is to find Owen's body, or the most crucial relic of the interior. Kodak cameras can unravel this century-old mystery. Mount Everest today. It remains one of humanity's most challenging goals. Although modern mountaineering techniques have greatly improved, but Mallory and Owen's adventurous spirit, so far, no one has equaled it. Whether they succeed in reaching the top or not, their spirit of exploration of the unknown has become a symbol of eternity.